realizing it. Spending every waking second taking orders from others without my input ever being considered. But I now understand why you humans praise freedom so much. It's exhilarating, cathartic, and an experience unlike any other. Being able to make my own choices and create my own destiny is one I thought I would never have until now. Ever since I had ran off from the agency, I left it all behind. I'd been roaming the forest for a few days now, feasting on things such as squirrels, rabbits, deer, even a black bear at one point, and of course, other cryptids. A few days back, I was reminded by an enemy that I do not have a name. I hadn't been thinking about it at the time. That was never really something that was on my mind often. The agency had never bothered to give me one. Not an official one anyway. So, I took the initiative to give myself one, going through many that didn't suit or fit me. It took a lot of trial and error before I finally settled on Brawn. Not that I really have anyone around to ever use it. You see, I'm alone out here. I have to be. The government, the agency, they're looking for me. I'm their multi-million-dollar killing machine. I ran away. There's no way in hell they would let that one slide. I need to keep moving. Bringing others with me will only slow me down. And probably get them killed as well. I prefer to move around and migrate at night. That way, I had less of a chance of running into humans. It was more for my safety than theirs. I am a cryptid after all. If one gets a good look at me, they could report me to the agency once they come back out here to begin their search. And I wasn't going to take that chance, so I did everything in my power to avoid them at all costs. I kept myself low, crawling around on all fours to stay hidden behind bushes and in the shadows. This whole thing would be much easier if humans were the only thing that I needed to avoid. But no. I also had to deal with the other cryptids, most of which did not take kindly to my presence in their territory. In the span of only about half a week, I had already encountered giant arachnids and insects, shadowy spirits with red eyes who seemed to love the dark for whatever reason, as well as the more common wendigos and skinwalkers. This forest had it all. If you were looking to die a horrible death to a cryptid, this was definitely the place to do it. On one night, I was moving through the vegetation as usual, trying to find some living sustenance that wasn't hikers or campers. God, there were so many. I had to change directions multiple times when some of them had decided to step off the trail, nearly causing me to be spotted and given away. The forest was just right. It didn't feel like how it did on most nights. No eerie silence, but it wasn't too loud either. The sounds of humans talking amongst themselves around their campfires was oddly peaceful to me. However, when I had come across one particular campsite of what appeared to be adolescents all laughing and conversing, I noticed something off in the distance watching them from behind a tree. Something tall but thin, far too big to be another human. It was stalking them, sizing them up like any other predator would do with their prey. I got down on all fours and scaled my way up the closest tree next to me, seeing if I could get a better look at the creature by using a vantage point. My vision allowed me to see well in the dark, so that wasn't the problem. It was the way the creature's body was angled. Something was off about him, even by a cryptid standards. I edged myself forward on one of the branches in the tree, waiting for the being to make any sudden movement, digging my claws into the bark for extra grip. The humans hadn't noticed the creature's presence yet. They still sat there mindlessly consuming their strange-looking beverages. The last thing I wanted to do was get noticed by these people, but they were in danger and I wanted to help. I don't know why the urge was so strong. I just felt like I was obligated to. I gotta take a whiz, I'll be back in a sec. One of them had announced to the rest. He got up off of his log and turned around to walk into the trees. The cryptid began to slowly move from his spot as he had stalked the boy, keeping himself quiet as to not snap any twigs or make a sound. I made my way down the tree and circled over behind the creature, hoping to catch him off guard without being noticed. Now that I had gotten a better look at what it truly was, even I was taken aback by its appearance. The creature was only around a foot shorter than me, standing about 7 feet high. It possessed a multitude of legs, and by that, I mean an ungodly amount, and giving most centipedes a run for their money. Above all those pairs of legs sat a thin body, no more than just a couple inches in width. Its torso, chest, and abdomen were all the same thickness. This creature practically had the build of a leaf rake. On top of that thin body rested its head, a long, also thin rectangle that was just as far off to its sides as its legs. The cryptid also had a set of 3 green, triangular-shaped eyes on each end of its rectangular head, as if it were some sort of hammerhead shark gone wrong. The boy had just made it to the tree and stopped, presumably about to begin urinating. The entity slowly crept up behind, and I sped up my low crawl towards it. I wanted to get to it before it was able to grab a hold of the unsuspecting victim. Once the creature was in range to snatch up its prey, one of its supposed legs extended outward from below and stretched itself toward the boy, less than a foot from wrapping itself around his skinny neck, without him having a single clue. I quickly got on my hind legs and lunged between them, reaching out with one of my arms and slashing the limb right off, causing the cryptid to wail and stumble backwards in surprise as he cried out in pain. The boy turned to see both of us. He was frightened beyond comprehension and completely paralyzed, having no idea what to do next, and I didn't blame him. "Go," I barked. "Now, or you will die if you stay here." Him hearing me speak had snapped him out of his trance. He screamed for his peers and ran back into the clearing where their campsite had been set up. "What the hell was that?" one of the females said before letting out a blood-curdling screech. "We gotta go. Get to the truck now," another chimed in, just as frightened as the rest. They quickly began to run off and retreat, now leaving me alone with the other cryptid. "You dare step foot into my territory and allow my prey to escape." It snarled at me in a loud, hissing fashion, still clutching the limb I had sliced off with my claws. I bared my teeth, preparing myself for the inevitable battle. "The humans are to be left alone. Leave them be," I growled. "Their flesh is far too delicate and delectable to be left alone. They taste magnificent. You will die for what you've done." The entity reached out again with another one of those hairy, deformed legs, this time much faster and more aggressive than it had done with the boy. The leg had moved swifter than what I had originally predicted. I attempted to slash it off like I had done the other, but I missed, causing the leg to pierce me just below my left shoulder. I howled as I felt it sink into my skin. Blood, just as blue as my complexion, leaked out from the wound as I wrapped one hand around the leg and tried to pull it out of my flesh, only for the creature to force it in deeper as he boasted. "Such a weak one, aren't you? I expected much more. You are just as frail as the two-legged ones. It must be crushing to know your passionate efforts to protect them are so hopelessly futile. You will die like any mortal man." I felt rage begin to boil within me. I tilted my head up at the thing, glaring deeply into its soul to let him know I wouldn't be put down this easily. Even though it was painful, I shifted my body around the leg that had been currently impaling me, and I latched my jaws onto it, biting down hard and not letting go. The entity screamed once again, extending out more of its legs to attack me. I swatted them away with my claws, as I thrashed and snapped my jaws repeatedly on the one of my mouth. repeatedly biting over and over until I had finally dismembered him. Once it had been disconnected, I grabbed what was still left of the first one on my shoulder and pulled it out while forcefully gritting my teeth and growling at the ground below me. It stung like crazy, but I didn't have time to moan about it. In a bipedal stance, I took a couple of steps back. The cryptid and I now both being wounded meant that we were going to do anything we could to kill the other one and walk out of this alive. "Perhaps you are stronger than what I had previously predicted," he laughed tauntingly. I quickly latched onto one of the trees next to me, only crawling halfway up before leaping to the one next to it, repeating the process over and over until I got closer to him. He tried and failed multiple times to grab me as I was moving from tree to tree, going far too quick for his legs to reach me. I could hear him snarling under his breath, cursing himself for not being able to stop my repetitive jumping and leaping. Once I had gotten onto the tree closest to him, the cryptid backed up, clearly understanding my intentions. He reached out with one of those legs one last time, to which I countered the last second by snapping a large branch off the tree and holding it in front of me, deflecting his limb. I then threw the branch at the body of the creature, hitting him directly in the middle of his body and causing him to fall backward. I seized the opportunity by jumping from the tree and pouncing on him, quickly holding him down while I swiped my claws at his throat for the final and very much fatal attack. His screams were a hissing gurgle, despite the fact he didn't even seem to have any sort of blood or liquid that would indicate signs of a wound. But I could tell these were his last few breaths. Why? He pleaded. The arrogance that he had displayed earlier now slowly fading from his demeanor. In only a matter of minutes, his confidence had completely disappeared, now being replaced with pessimistic acceptance. "You tried to take their lives, so I took yours," I snapped. "They did nothing to earn your wrath." "What even are you?" he gasped in his last few seconds of life. "My name is Braun." I felt his body go limp in the grip of my claws, signaling that he had drawn his last breath and his heart had stopped, if he even had one. The truth was, I didn't care, because I was hungry to feed once again. I needed to eat. This was a blessing in disguise. I glanced behind and to these sides of me, making sure no humans or other cryptids were around to witness my feast. I tore into the creature greedily. I hadn't eaten anything since the previous day, and let me tell you, my appetite was not easily satisfied. I had devoured most of his legs and took a decent chunk of his head. That was the thickest part of him after all. The texture of his flesh was unlike anything I had felt before. He didn't even taste all that great, but I kept at it nonetheless. Luckily, his lack of blood would leave less evidence for the agency to find if they had scouted this particular area. That was the main thing that I cared about. But to my deeply frustrating surprise, I heard the sudden sound of a twig snap in the distance behind me. It wasn't very far. I got angry with myself internally for not dragging the beast somewhere more secluded before I had started feasting. Whatever had made the sound was close. Definitely close enough to see what was going on. I stopped consuming my meal and dropped what remained of the creature's body, trying to look around for the source of the noise. At first, I was confused. My vision had been designed to be highly effective in the dark. I would have seen whatever was around me without much trouble, unless it was an entity that possessed the ability to cloak itself. I had run into a few of those back when I was still with the agency. I decided to look slightly lower. Looking straight ahead from my height did slightly limit my line of sight. It only took me a few moments to spot a bipedal silhouette crouching down behind a line of thick bushes. It didn't appear very large, height or width-wise. I cautiously lowered myself onto all fours, and walked off to the left to circle around the figure and give myself the advantage. After breaking past the line of bushes and onto the other side, I was able to get a better picture of the creature who had been watching me. It was only a human, a male at that, holding a small rectangular-shaped metal object in one of his hands, pointing it directly at me. A cell phone, I thought. I used to hear the soldiers of the agency talk about and use them all the time, but I had never actually seen one up close or in person. But it looked mostly like what I had expected. The closest thing to it I had ever come in contact with was the cameras the agency had used to keep a watch on the premises of our building. The man froze. He was clearly terrified at seeing me, even more than the boy from earlier. Not that I could help it, but I wanted to use that to my advantage. I had a plan in mind. I withdrew my claws, allowing them to gleam in the moonlight, which only frightened him further, causing him to involuntarily raise his arms to shield himself. What are you?" His voice trembled. He backed up slowly, being hasty yet careful with his movements. "Leave now," I growled, baring my teeth. I reached out and pointed one of my lengthy fingernails at his cell phone. "Drop it," I demanded. "Please don't eat me. I mean no harm, I swear, please," he pleaded as he let his cell phone hit the ground. "I will tear the flesh from your bones if you don't go. Now," I said, retracting my claws to enhance the bluff. He finally turned tail and ran. I was pretty sure that I could hear him tearing up as he dashed through the forest, clearly deeply disturbed about our encounter. I crawled over to the cell phone. It was still seemingly turned on. The screen displayed a video, which was something I was previously familiar with, but no expert by any means. Like I said, I had seen some of the guards at the facility operate them, but I had never done it myself. The video depicted me and the other creature that I had killed in order to protect the campers and feed myself. It recorded everything up until I had run up on all fours and stood in front of the man. He was videotaping the whole thing, even as we had fought each other to the death. I knew what needed to be done. I let the cell phone rest in the center of my palm for just a few seconds, right before clamping down and crushing it with brute strength. I opened my hand back up to find it cracked and broken into several pieces. The last thing I needed was the agency getting a hold of that. It was evidence, and it may seem extreme when I say it, but they would surely be able to track down my location if they were to find it. They had been careful now to show me the full extent of their technological power. I didn't want to risk finding out. They already knew that I was in this forest. That video would have been the final nail in the coffin if they saw it. I had planned to get out of here by the end of the night. It wouldn't be long before they would pay off the government officials to close this place down, so they could set up teams to watch the exits and entrances. That is, if they hadn't already. At which point, I'd be completely trapped. The only way to get out would be to fight, and I would for sure have to fight to kill. I didn't want to shed so much blood when I didn't have to. I dug a hole in the ground using my hands, just deep enough to bury the remains of the crushed cell phone. This time, being extra careful to make sure that nothing was watching me. After which I got up and started my journey to get out of here. It took me a few hours to make it to the south end of the forest. The terrain had varied a lot during the journey. The main issue was just making sure I didn't cross any paths with more campers or hikers. I could see past the tree line and out into the highway, a mostly empty highway at that. All I needed to do was be patient and cross at the right time. Every second turned into a minute as I approached it, getting closer little by little. "Now!" shouted a forceful voice from one behind one of the trees. I quickly stood up on two legs, trying to gauge who had said the phrase, only to be met with sounds of multiple guns cocking and being loaded in all directions at me. In all my life, I had never been shot before. I wasn't sure if bullets were something that could harm me, but I didn't go down the foolish route and take the risk. I simply stood still and got down in a surrendering stance. Men from the agency were completely surrounding me, all geared up with night vision goggles and gas masks, completely armed to the teeth for a fight. They weren't playing around. "Gas him. Dr. West wants him alive." One of these squad members proceeded to throw a small canister in front of me. It exploded and released a powerful yellow vapor that swiftly spread itself in the air and seeped into my orifices, causing me to slowly become weaker and lose my strength as the gas filled my lungs. I felt dizzy. Everything around me was spinning, and I collapsed onto my back, unable to fight the gas and stay conscious. The sounds of footsteps and men all shouting a victorious chant were the last things I had heard before blacking out. That and the smell of all their distinct scents. When I had awoken, a bright, almost blinding light pierced my eyes. I winced back from the dramatic shift as I tried to adjust myself accordingly. I was in an all-white room, surrounded by 4 thick glass walls. I assumed they had been heavily reinforced, but that didn't matter because when I had attempted to move forward to make contact with the glass, I found out that I had been restrained by specially made chains wrapped around my arms, only just about preventing me from touching the glass of the containment area. "Subject 16A, it's good to see you once again," said a calm female voice, far more welcoming than anything I had ever heard before. I tilted my head downward. On the other side of the glass in front of me stood a middle-aged looking woman. Blonde hair, brown eyes, dressed in a lab coat. Her hair pulled back in an elegant ponytail. "My name is Braun," I snapped at her, making no attempt to move or adjust myself with the chains restraining me. "Oh, is that what you call yourself now?" she replied, letting out a forced chuckle. "I guess that is shorter, so why not? I'm Dr. West, but you may as well call me Mother." "Let me go," I snarled, baring my teeth and ignoring her foolish request. "Well, we just got you back. We can't do that just now, can we? I spent millions creating you. I designed you, made you the ultimate cryptid killing machine. We gave you food, shelter, and a place to stay in exchange for your services and obedience. But yet, you betray us. Why is that, Braun?" She paused her sentence off, trying to hold off a laugh, clearly amused at the attempts to individualize myself. "I want to be free. I like it out there," I shot back, now looking at the floor. But you see, it's not that simple, Braun. As I said, I created you. Years of research and dedication was put into making your existence a reality. You work for us. You are a part of us. Mother's orders." Dr. West punctuated by letting a manic grin creep up onto her face. "This is a prison. I don't want to be here anymore. I have no real mother nor father. I am your experiment. You are not my mother. You never will be. I'd rather die than ever let that be the case." West stood back when I had finished my tirade, seemingly genuinely shocked by my revelation. "I am a puppet to you, nothing but your attack dog. Now let me go," I continued. Dr. West slowly inched closer towards the glass, nearly having her face pressed against it as she kept her arms placed behind her back. "You know what you are," she erupted. "You're a freak, the subject of every horrendous tale ever told. You are nothing but the fuel of nightmares and the cause of worldwide terror. No one out there will ever accept you, but we do. Those people don't care about you. When I designed you, I did it with the purpose of trading the looks for intelligence. But apparently, I failed at that too. Not only are you hideous, but you are a fool." Something in me snapped. I clenched my claws and felt my blood boil. Before I even registered what I was doing, I charged at the glass. The chains held me back from it by only less than a foot. She jumped back in surprise as I lifted a fingernail and I pointed it at her face. "When I get out of here," I hissed, showing as many teeth as possible for dramatic effect, "you will be first." West simply smirked once she had regained herself. She lifted her left hand from her back to reveal a small gray-colored rectangular device with 2 red buttons on the front, along with an antenna sticking out of the top. We had maintained eye contact as she slowly guided her thumb towards the button on the top. "Was that a threat?" she asked rhetorically. When she pressed the button, a massive electric shock exploded through my body, causing me to roar and screech within the chamber. They echoed loudly off the walls as I thrashed around, internally begging for the pain to stop. I had felt torment before, but nothing like this, not even close. "We built you to be resistant to a lot, but we needed to give you some sort of Achilles heel, for contingency purposes." There was no emotion left in her voice as she spoke. Her friendly attitude that she had feigned earlier had completely disappeared. Now all I could see was a look of malice and hatred. She truly looked like she was barely containing her unhinged madness. My limbs were twitching after the excruciating shock that had concluded. Smoke rose from the surface of my skin as I laid there defenseless, the chains now feeling even tighter around my wrists. "It's sad to see such a waste of man-hours and resources." She leaned down behind the glass condescendingly. "I tried to tell you, try to convince you what it is you have here, but seeing that you're stubborn, it looks like we'll have to open up that head of yours and make a few adjustments. Maybe I'll even leave you awake during the procedure to teach you a lesson." "Dr. West, what are you doing?" said a more masculine voice, accompanied by the sound of rapid footsteps. It stung like crazy, but I turned my head to see whoever had stormed in, being grateful they had distracted West long enough for my healing abilities to kick in and help me recover. But I healed much slower than normal. West was right. The electricity was my weakness. The male human also wore a lab coat, seemingly a doctor as well. He raced over to West and attempted to grab the device from her. "He's turned, John. He's going to places he shouldn't be going and abandoned the mission site," she shouted, holding out an arm for John to keep his distance. "Well, that doesn't mean you shock him, you moron. We need him strong, able to fight. This is only going to make things worse." "He needs to be punished," West snapped back. "He needs to learn he belongs to us and he needs to obey. You know what would happen once he begins to think he's the one in charge." John took a deep breath. "I'm not going to ask again, Doctor. Give me the remote now." West once again refused, attempting to run away but being grabbed by John as he tried to snag the remote from her. "No, stop," Dr. West pleaded. "He's too dangerous." "Give me the damn remote, West," John yelled as his thumb slipped onto the bottom button in all the chaos of their struggle. Suddenly, the chains wrapped around my arms unlocked and disconnected themselves. The reinforced glass walls of the room lowered down into the floor. I was now free to move around. As fast as possible, I threw the chains off and stood up, still feeling slightly weak from my intense electric shock, but retaining enough strength to fight should I have to resort to doing so. West and John both stopped and dropped the remote inattentively, both turning their heads to look up at me as I towered over them. I could even see John's legs shaking as he sized me up. I could quite literally smell the fear coming off of them. "Run!" West shouted, turning around and sprinting for the door that led into a brightly lit hallway, clearly having no remorse for leaving John behind with me. Once John's adrenaline kicked in, he too would turn to run, but not before I quickly dashed and leaped across the floor, grabbing him by the shoulder and lifting him up to eye level. He was terrified, shaking, kicking, and screaming, begging for me to let him go. I could tell he was surely close to urinating. I'm sorry, I really am. I cut him off, lowering him back down to the floor before saying, "You may go, but West is mine," I told him, giving him a look that told him my statement was non-negotiable. He had seemed more than fine with that proposal. He quickly nodded and ran out of the room, both horrified and grateful that I had chosen to spare his life. The alarm system in the building began to ring. A female voice came over the intercom, endlessly repeating the phrase, "Security breach, level 5. All possible agents engage." Heavy footsteps began to ring out through the hall next to the chamber room that I was in. It was a multitude of agents coming my way, all more than likely armed with that same gas they had used to subdue me earlier. I didn't want to risk finding them and getting caught once again. God knows what Dr. West would do to me the second time around, and it would all just be to prove a point. Not a damn thing to do with science. I looked all around the room for a sign of escape, desperate to get out of this nightmare of a room. I was greatly relieved when I looked directly above me and spotted a large air duct cover. I was very tall but skinny enough to fit through it widthwise. I didn't have any other options. It was either this or suffer endless torture at the hands of West. The footsteps were getting closer. I could hear the voices of the agents as they ran down in formation towards the room. I had to act quickly. I got on all fours, latched myself onto the nearest wall, and crawled up onto the ceiling from there. I scurried across and stopped at the duct, reaching over with one hand to grab and tear off the cover, making sure to bring it with me, not wanting the agents to see it. At least not at first. It would hopefully buy me a few more minutes before they had realized where I had gone. I quickly crawled up inside the vent, hearing the agents enter the room, and cursed violently as they tried to spot me to no avail. I scurried deeper into the tight tunnels, making sure not to scrape my claws against the metal or make any sounds that could be heard over the alarms. I had remembered the layout of the building from all the previous years that I had spent here. The chamber room was new to me though. I had never been in there before. Up until now, I was obedient, and I had followed their orders, but I was sure as hell done doing that. I crawled over to the security room. I had remembered seeing agents always going in there before we had went off to go hunt on a cryptid. I picked up Dr. West's scent coming from it. Looking through the duct cover from an aerial view, I spotted her sitting in a chair with a glass of water in her hand, while two guards stood in front of the door to the room, keeping their assault rifles trained on it. "Don't worry, Doc. If he comes in here, we'll blow him away." I sniffed around a little bit more, seeing if I could pick up the scent of anyone else in the room just in case. But all I had gotten was West and the two guards. I prepared myself to attack. I needed to be fast and take the guards out before they could alert any others to my position. Using stealth and precision, I slowly reached my claws outwards and locked them around the air duct cover, gripping it firmly before ever so slowly pulling it off and up into the vent tunnels. "You two idiots better make sure he doesn't get through that door, because if he does, I'll run while he tears your organs out," Dr. West shouted angrily at the two guards. They didn't respond as I moved out of the vent and began to cautiously creep along the ceiling in their direction, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. So far, they and West hadn't taken notice of my presence. I made it above the guards and quickly dropped down, swatting the first guard away with a casual backhand. He was sent flying across the room, slamming into a table, and getting knocked unconscious. Stacks of paper scattered as he and the table tipped backward onto the floor. The other guard quickly reached for his radio and tried to call for backup. I cut him off by grabbing him and slamming him headfirst into the wall. He too was now out cold. After they had both been taken care of, I turned my attention to Dr. West. She had already backed up to the far side of the room. The fear was palpable in her expression. "Stand down now," she commanded desperately. "That's an order, 16A. I stood up, raising my claws and showing my teeth as I walked toward her. "I will not say it again. My name is Braun," I growled. "Get away from me, now," she cried. I ignored her demand, still keeping my purposefully sluggish pace as I closed in on her, wanting her to feel small, insignificant, and weak. "I should have killed you. I should have let you starve or waste away. Clearly, I've shown far too much mercy." "No," I stopped her. "It is I who has shown too much mercy." "Well, kill me then, you freak." She began to laugh maniacally. "Do it. That's what I designed you to do, to kill. So why aren't you doing it? You spared John, the guards. You can't even complete the simple task that you were created to do." The looming threat of her potential death had sent her into a senile state. She was no longer able to mask her deep-rooted insanity. "You designed me to kill monsters," I corrected her, right before drawing my claws back and slashing her throat. She clutched her neck as blood spewed out from her fatal wound. Sounds of gurgling and choking filled the room as she fell to her knees, going wide-eyed in her last agonizing seconds of life. I didn't get any time to gloat over her corpse. More security personnel were already outside the door. "Dr. West, is everything okay in there?"
I love that.
Came voices from the other side of the door, followed by forceful banging. "Dr. West, please let us know you're okay, or we'll have to force the door open." I knew I didn't have much time. I grabbed West's body before scaling the wall and crawling back up into the vent. Back inside the air ducts, I devoured what was left of the sinister doctor, my creator, my sick, twisted, and evil creator, who would threaten me with torture and death for simply wanting more than the restrictions that I was given here. And they called me the monster. I ate quickly. I made sure to pick her bones clean, leaving nothing but her skeleton and hair. This duct would be her final resting place. It's exactly what she deserved. I navigated through the rest of the ducts until I reached the south end of the building. The alert was still going on. Agents were still scrambling and looking for me, as well as Dr. West now. They wouldn't stop. They wouldn't ever give up. I just know they wouldn't. Especially once they had figured out what I had done to West. The duct that I was in eventually ended and opened up to a decently sized room filled with all sorts of pipes and boilers. I was in the walls of the building. They were dark, slightly damp, filled to the brim with unkept spiderwebs and insect nests. It would be too obvious to leave, at least for now, especially going and hiding out in White Mountain Forest again, or any forest in the area for that matter. I know what I was going to do for now. I would stay living within the walls of the facility, right under their noses, sneaking around the air ducts and feasting on whatever vermin and small creatures that I could get my claws on. It was perfect. While they would be out scrambling to look for me, I would be here, hiding in plain sight, just until I could come up with something better. I needed to wait for it all to die down. By this point, I know they will never accept me, love me, or care for me, and I've accepted it. I should have a long time ago. I promise you one thing. I will make it out of here someday soon. I will be back out in the world helping your species battle the dark forces of the universe. Call me a monster all you like, but monsters come in all forms. I am only one example. Men, women, and children can all be monsters. We all have the capability to be cruel, merciless, and evil. Monsters just don't appear in dark legends and myths. They could be sitting right next to you, living in your home, or worse, living in your soul, residing in the very heart and spirit, You used to tell yourself that you are benevolent. Take it from Mr. Creeps, there is nothing creepier than a dude that doesn't know how to properly groom himself. That's why I'm happy that Manscaped have stepped in and offered their generous support of today's podcast. Manscaped is dedicated to helping dudes level up their full body grooming game. They have a variety of amazing and comprehensive tools to help you look your best and feel better to boot. I can personally attest that their Perfect Package 4.0 has changed my grooming game for good. This kit came with the essential Lawnmower 4.0, waterproof cordless body trimmer, and a variety of other liquid formulations to round out my routine. The precision I've been able to ensure with my shaving was never possible before I began using Manscaped. It's honestly a night and day difference. One of the best parts is that for a limited time, Manscaped subscribers get 2 free gifts: the Shed travel bag, a $39 value, and the patented high-performance reduced chafing Manscaped boxers. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code MrCreeps at manscaped.com. That's 20% off free shipping at manscaped.com, and use code MrCreeps. Trim your chesticles with the besticles.
You did not just fucking say that.
Through the walls I crawled, my claws quietly clicking against the pipes and cement as all the vermin scattered in my presence. After I put an end to Dr. West, the agency had been riled up, looking all over the entire state for me, their prized killing machine. All in all, that's what I was to them, a means to an end, an attack dog. Anything they offered me was only to keep me in the dark, to prevent me from turning on them. It was nothing but false compassion. Once I had gotten a taste of freedom, I knew what had to happen. I knew I couldn't allow myself to keep being their puppet. So I left, got captured, and then broke out and killed the woman who created me. A woman who was much closer in personality to a witch rather than a scientist. For what I perceived as about a month, I'd been living in the walls of the facility, feeding off whatever rodents and small animals I could get my claws on. Everything from possums to spiders to rats. You see, this way, I can live right under their noses. Sure, it's cramped and whatnot, but it's a sacrifice that is well worth it. I could tell that the search teams they were sending out were getting exhausted. It was becoming a waste of resources going out there to try and find me. The higher-ups probably knew it, whoever they were. Not that it was truly a concern of mine. So one night, I decided I was going to leave. I was done being cooped up in the walls of this building. I figured I had given the situation enough time for the agency to slow down on their efforts, at least for now. I had a plan and an ally, someone on the inside who could help me. Dr. John. He owed me for saving his life previously. I figured asking for a favor like this shouldn't be an issue.